Hey, good evening. Welcome back to our Old Testament studies, Psalm number 20. We went through the time warp last night and sprang forward 1 hour, so welcome to the new time for another till November, I guess. We'll switch back, I guess. But Psalm 20, a little short psalm, 9 verses. Uh, my heading says it's another Psalm of David. Most of them we've read so far, if not all of them, have been attributed to David, but we'll get into some later that will not be David's, but this psalm is like a lot of things in the Old Testament. It had a immediate and literal thing they were talking about at the time. Maybe this one looks like they were talking about the king, and they were getting ready to go into battle, and the victory was assured. But as Christians, we put on our Christian lenses and we interpret it, and we see, oh, there's a lot bigger picture than what was going on in the local and immediate thing there too. We can see Jesus in these psalms. So, the Lord, verse 1, Psalm 20, verse 1, the Lord hear thee in the day of trouble. What's the day of trouble? Well, for the Christian, he said, that's the day that I was convicted of my sins, and I realized I was in trouble with God, and I was in trouble in eternity, and I called on the name of the Lord, and the Lord heard me. He'll hear you in that day of trouble, and that'll preserve you from the day of trouble at the judgment, because the Lord heard you that day. The Lord hear thee in the day of trouble. The name of the God of Jacob defend thee. It's interesting through the Old Testament that God is often referred to as the God of Jacob, or the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here, just Jacob. And it's kind of like him being the God of David and the God of Paul, too. It gives us hope, because if you read Jacob's life story, boy, he was a scoundrel, wasn't he? But God identifies himself with him, said he's the God of Jacob. Send thee help, verse 2, send thee help from the sanctuary and strengthen thee out of Zion. For the Christian, God sends us help right out of the throne room of heaven, that sanctuary. And strengthen thee out of Zion. For the Jew, Zion was the hills behind the temple of Jerusalem there, but the Christian church has usually just attributed these sayings about Zion as it attributes them to the church. We're marching to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Remember, verse 3, remember all thy offerings and accept thy burnt sacrifice, musical rest, Selah. But remember your offerings and accept your burnt sacrifice, God. And you know what? He did and he does, because the ultimate offering that all the other ones pointed to was the offering of Christ on Calvary. And God accepted that sacrifice on our behalf forever. Verse 4, grant thee according to your own heart and fulfill all thy counsel. God's sovereign. He'll grant according to his own heart, and he'll fulfill all his counsel. Every promise in this Bible, God's going to fulfill that, and you can claim it. We will rejoice in thy salvation. Boy, we've got a lot of things to rejoice in, verse 5, but there's nothing we can rejoice more in that we're saved. Rejoice in your salvation. When David got away from God at one point in his life, and he was under conviction, he writes a psalm, and he said, Lord, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. He had lost that joy, hadn't he, when he got out and sinned. And now over here he says, rejoice in your salvation. And in the name of our God, we'll set up banners. That's the word for flag. Christians, we plant our flag on Calvary, don't we, where Christ died for us. The Lord fulfill all your petitions. Verse 6, now know that let's try it this way. Now know I that the Lord saves his anointed. And anointed is another, in the Hebrew, it can be translated the Messiah, too. Talking about Christ here, ultimately, isn't it? The Lord saves his anointed. And he'll hear him. And we find out in the New Testament, Jesus prays for us. He makes intercession for his church. God hears him for sure. From his holy heaven with the saving strength of his right hand. Verse 7, some trust in chariots and some in horses. Now, back in David's days, chariots and horses were war machines. They were trusting in their military might. But David says, but you know what? It says, we'll remember the name of the Lord our God, because there's nothing more powerful than God. They, verse 8's got a they and we in it. We being God's people, they being the world. They are brought down and fallen. They's the ones that's just trusting in their own might, their own military strength. But we are risen and stand upright. When the smoke clears, the Christians are going to be the winners, folks. Verse 9, save Lord. Save Lord is literally Hosanna in the Hebrew. Save Lord, Hosanna. It's a Hosanna psalm. And let the King hear us when we call. And if you call on him out of a sincere heart, King Jesus will hear you, I promise you. See you next time.